many different lineages in Tibet. Drikung's one of the biggest ones. Um, he never got out of Tibet, so he's in Lhasa, and yeah, Chungsang and Chetsang means bigger brother and little brother. The history going way back, you had two different brothers who were head of the lineage, and they've kept it that way. So the man on the left is in Tibet. He hasn't gotten out of Tibet. Well, he has. He's been briefly out in um, India, but he can't be outwardly active in the way. Chetsang Rinpoche on the right has been here several times, and he is one of the closest of the lineage heads to Dalai Lama. They're very good friends, and his work has been very kind of similar, establishing, teaching. Like for instance, Kempo. Kempo got his degree, his Kempo degree, from an institution that Chetsang Rinpoche set up in northern India. Yeah, yeah. So at any rate, technically we're part of his organization. But when we asked if we could be under him organizationally, he said yes, but I'm completely not involved. He said it's completely decentralized. He's not like the Pope or something that has some sort of administrative function here. And Garamachay is in the same lineage. He is one of the three lamas that are direct in the hierarchy, directly under those two. But Garamachay himself is in Arizona, and we sponsored his first tour of the United States, and we've had a very fortunate experience having been there at the beginning, so to speak, before he had a Dharma center at all. He came here every year for many years, but now he's in his 80s and doesn't travel anymore. But, you know, I think four of our people went out to Arizona and saw him just recently. The woman that you met at Tali, Michelle, yeah. She and Ryan and Ben drove out to Arizona to see him. Yeah. I think it's been out for a year, maybe 2 years. Yeah, it's recent. Yeah, it's recent. It's Vajrakalaya, and I can't remember what the subtitle is, a handbook or something to practice. And yeah, yeah, it's Gotcha Rinpoche. Yeah, the big blue one. Yeah, and translated by Ari Kiev, just like the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. Yeah, yeah. Where are we here? Oh, we can start. Okay. All right. Um, there it is. There it is. Very good. So also, Tiffany, for your benefit as being new, so we're going through, what we're reading is the Dalai Lama's introduction to the first complete translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So what you have is part of this book. Yeah, that book. And the introduction is very good. Yeah. But so don't feel like you're without a text. Yeah, that's the one, right? Right. And we've printed out some of these introductions too. Uh, yeah. So it's an amazing resource, of course. But a couple reasons why we're doing this is that one, um, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is, highly esoteric, but it's showing people how to take advantage of the most advantageous moment for coming to enlightenment, which is our death. So there are all sorts of instructions on what can be done. And of course, it's said that, the ordinary yogi dies without fear. the medium yogi dies with satisfaction, and the great yogis die with joy, knowing this opportunity. Now, it's also particularly wonderful because of the practice of the preparation for death and awareness of these states of minds that can be used is also parallel to what are these highest yoga tantra practices that can be done in our current body. Because Buddhism teaches two kinds of rebirth. There's the rebirth of lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, but there's also the rebirth from moment to moment to moment. We are actually completely recreated in every instant, but we don't experience it that way. So consequently, there are practices that we'll be getting into too that these kind of parallel, and that's very helpful. But not to be concerned, you kind of jumped into postgraduate level of Buddhist studies here, but there's no mistakes. You wouldn't be here unless this was a good moment for you to be here, okay?
Frank,
Hi.
you guys, hi. You guys had talked about having a retreat that might be coming up. I was wondering if you knew approximately when
Um, we're planning, boy, unfortunately Gretchen's not here tonight, which is my
and she's your calendar.
no, my calendar, but it's like Lama Tarchin says, wisdom is female and skillful means is male. And Lama Tarchin says they have to tell us what to do and we have to do it. So, so
I'll tell Michael.
yes, yes, he keeps doing his calendar, he'll come to that experience himself.
Realization, yeah.
Right.
Try and turn down your microphone if you're on Zoom,
Yeah,
if it's possible.
yeah.
I was wondering, when you said that you have to die with joy, is the joyous effort from the six perfections help us get to that?
Yeah, the joy is a function of your understanding, faith and understanding both. So anyway, yeah, as far as a retreat, we've got the POA. First, there's a Tara weekend that's coming up, and I can't remember when. It should be on the website already, I think. Where, yeah, I think it's a Saturday, yeah. And then Sunday morning is going to be the dedication of merit to that. Kempo will be leading that. Then there's another weekend coming up with the POA teachings, and practice. March 30th, thank you. Is that a Saturday also? Yeah, we got something. And then we're also, the other things further in the future, I mean, obviously Lava Ambu's coming again to do the Vajrakalaya week. And Rinchen Dorje is coming, and I can't remember what he's teaching. Do you know? Yeah. That's what I'm thinking, Chakrasamvara, which is the main yidam of the Drikung. So that's something special. He's one who's done like a 12-year retreat in his history. Then also we have Diki Palmo, I'm not sure of her name, Tibetan nun, who's coming here and will be teaching and will be practicing Chud with her. Chud, it's sometime in August, I think, or something like that. And Chud is rather remarkable. It has one foot in the Sutric world because the text is on the perfection of wisdom, and then it has one foot in the Tantric world because you visualize yourself in your ordinary body rather than taking a Buddha form, and basically you're offering your body because it's the strongest attachment we have is to the body. You're offering it to Vajrayogini, who we summon all our demons and then satisfy them by giving this visualized offering of our body. It's put in a big skull cup, boiled down, and the nectar is sprinkled on all 6 realms. But it's known in Tibet, it's the one practice that originated in Tibet and then went to India. So you had Indian gurus going to Tibet to take teachings from a Tibetan woman, Machig Lapdrung, who developed this. it was traditionally practiced. It's practiced in all the lineages, and now it's practiced in the monasteries too. But originally, it was something that was done outside of the monasteries, and typically practiced in cemeteries, because to raise that fear of death and the, and again, the cemeteries in India especially were, for us, it's like a park. I like going to the cemetery. I think I'll have lunch there. But in India, it wasn't like that. You had bodies half exposed, vultures, hyenas, a fearful place. So you can confront your own demons. But very powerful practice, very, very beautiful. Yeah, it's true. It's different. It's different. So we're going to back up a little bit on the Dalai Lama's introduction to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. We've been going through it slowly. He starts out with the basic Buddhist teachings on impermanence, dissatisfaction or suffering, and what's the third one? Where's my old mind? Which one? No self. Thank you. Thank you. So these are the basic teachings that he started out giving, and he's never wavered. It never wavered from that. These are all just incorporated into everything that he taught. And his first teaching was on the 5 skandhas, they're called, the 5 accumulations. In other words, how do we exist? And he did this kind of like, it's like a surgeon, cutting through the body, looking in this deep analysis. His first teaching was, of course, of suffering, that in this existence that we find ourselves, everything is dissatisfactory, and we're marked by dissatisfaction. But happily, this is not the final state. This is just a limited understanding we have. And you can get an idea of this. This is so remarkable. The Buddha is so far ahead of his time, because, if you've ever seen a representation of the visual spectrum that a bumblebee can see, for instance, or a honeybee, it's much more than we have. So we have a limited vision. We understand that by just in that way. And what Buddha taught was that we have limited vision, and therefore we suffer. And this limited vision is, in evolution, would be called fitness. I mean, we know biologically, like the honeybee and us, we're evolving, but just based on what works for us. What is it necessary to survive? If you survive, you can pass on your genes, and that's a big success for biology. But to give you an idea, there's now a study that came out last week. I can't remember where it was from, but reputable, scientific. The origins of multiple sclerosis. They've traced it now from pastoral types that moved into Northern Europe. I don't know, it's either 5,000 or 50,000 years ago, I can't remember. But nonetheless, they developed this ability, this genetic ability, because they had animals. So they had a lot of infections and, living around manure and all of that. Plus whatever the animals got could transfer to them sometimes, as we know, with bird flu and things. So they developed genetically, to help them survive, these abilities to fight certain kinds of infection. But then some of those became autoimmune diseases. So they actually start attacking like the lining of the nerves. That's what multiple sclerosis is. But of course, in a biological sense, if you have this ability to survive some bad infection, so you can get to be age 25 and pass on your genes, biology doesn't care what happens to you at age 60 when these degenerative things start happening. So this is fitness. This is what we know. And our minds have developed that way, our brains basically, of this fitness. We see what's necessary for our survival. And that's all, scientific, accurate, all of that. But the Buddha saw, he didn't call it fitness, but basically our fitness is this fact of being dissatisfactory, because we can't see that whole range of the spectrum like the bumblebee does. It's out there, it's real, but we can't see it. Now with our machines, we can some more. But nonetheless, this partial kind of understanding, this partial existence that we have is dissatisfactory. And so the Buddha's first teaching was about how do we actually exist in our ordinary way? Well, body and mind. And then he gets into the details. Body he called form, And then he gets into the details of mind. What is mind? Well, there's first feeling, and this doesn't mean our emotions like I feel your pain. In this sense, feelings means you're either attracted to something or repelled by something, or you're neutral. You know, you're driving around on the freeway, all those people out there, we're just neutral. We don't have any feeling, or we have a neutral feeling. So you have that. That's the first aspect of mind. But then next is perception. And this old English word percept is like it meant like a bird landing on a wire or a bird landing on a branch. So now the mind is becoming more focused, and it's actually, you know, picking something out in this field of feeling. And then when it does, and so what do? It has a form, like I always use this example of rhinoceros. But then the next aspect of mind is called the samskaras. So it's similar to samsara, but only sounds that way. It's not. It's samskaras, or baggage, past impressions. With that particular perception we have from our past experience of lifetimes, or even in this lifetime, you know, associations. I used to joke because I had a good practitioner friend at the Zen Center who was Polish, and her English was a little rough, you know. And she would talk about if someone was sort of giving her a hard time, she would say that person has so much luggage, when she meant to say baggage, psychological baggage, luggage for her. At any rate, so you see yeah, right. So you see now the the rhinoceros, right? And now suddenly, you know, if your baggage is, hey, I've been a female rhinoceros before, looks pretty good, she's friendly, could be my sister. Or if you're a male rhinoceros, hey, I'm kind of interested out there. But if you're something that's been killed by a rhinoceros, you know, it's like away. And then finally, consciousness. So consciousness is with knowing. That's what it literally means. So the Buddha said he looked at all of that, and this was the experience of his great enlightenment. Okay, we got body and mind, but you know what? There's no self there. And this is what was so completely radical about his teachings at the time. This is what he had been unwilling to accept. He wasn't thinking in terms of no self when he went on his great quest, but he got to the highest level of this teacher, highest level of that teacher, and it wasn't enough for him. He still had this question about suffering. Why do we suffer? Is there anything that can be done about this? So we've got these three great truths of suffering, dissatisfaction, of impermanence, and no self. You look into those five skandhas, you don't find an independent existing self. There's not something there you can grab onto and say, this is the self. But then when you look at how you actually function in the world, everything is being filtered through this sense of self. And it's so profound. We've done such a great job of meditating on this way. This assumption, mental assumption, it's all mind, but we've just habituated ourselves to it again and again and again. So you can see it in your meditation. You know, you're meditating, there's always a sense of I am meditating. Oh, I had a good experience, that I. And that's what we're doing. We're looking into that. So, Dalai Lama, who is meditating? Very good question. If you burn into that, you'll get some understanding, actually. Yeah. But Dalai Lama starts out by teaching on this, and then he gets into the continuity of mind. So this is stuff that we've gone over already, but just to bring you up to speed. Now he gets into the continuity of mind. And this is something that is often hard for many of us in the West to, you know, naturally accept. We're not raised this way. But if you go around the whole world, there's some sort of continuity of mind that really the majority of the world believes in. I mean, you know, you've usually the theistic types, you know, they always think about one lifetime more, but the Hindus and the Buddhists have many lifetimes, and there are many sort of naturalistic beliefs or traditions too that, you know, again, don't have trouble with this. But our modern scientific, you know, quasi-nihilistic, materialistic view, you know, we just don't go there. and consequently it isn't developed. But he gets into a big discussion of it, so you can read through that. And now that's brought us to, he's going to start talking about the highest Tantra. And I thought I would back up just a couple of pages to give you an idea of this. So as Pat pointed out, we ended up on page Roman numeral 22, but I'm going to go back 2 pages just to sort of get another running start at it. Because he's talking about this idea of continuity and therefore preparation for death. So I'm at the top of page XX 20. Now, as to the nature of the actual preparation itself, this will depend on each individual's depth of spiritual aspiration. For example, I want to say one other thing, because we're going to get into the highest yoga tantra. It's said that the Buddhist path, you can think of, they talk about 84,000 different categories of teachings, because there's just so much variety in human beings. And therefore, it's just like the physician's desk reference or something, this book that has the official medications that can be used. I mean, it's so thick because there's so many types of dis-ease. And so we have many, many things. And that can be wildly confusing for someone, because what is loosely called Tibetan Buddhism is just the fullest extent of those. It doesn't deny the validity of what's called Chinese Buddhism or Japanese Buddhism or whatever. All those things are fine. But the way the Dharma came to Tibet was unusual in that instead of serendipitously monks traveling with merchants and then suddenly this filtering into different countries, with the Tibetans, they decided from the top down. The emperor, and Tibet was very powerful then. They had conquered China, the Chinese capital anyway. They decided, okay, we're going to be Buddhists now. They didn't have a written language. And they went through centuries of sending their best and brightest over the Himalayas to India. And they got transmissions of the full range of Buddhist teachings as they existed at their cultural height 1,500 years after the Buddha passed away in India. So it's just tremendous. I mean, Buddhism was in Afghanistan, in parts of Iran, and further, it had kind of, I mean, sort of like in South America, you'll see it's actually an ancient Inca festival on the full moon or something, but it's like a thing out of the Catholic Church, because the church, absorbed all those things instead of just trying to push them away. They gave a Christian interpretation to it, and similar thing in Buddhism. So, for instance, Tantric Buddhism was not much taught at all in Buddha's lifetime, but in the time that it was in India, eventually the Tantra came with Buddhist understanding, into Buddhist teachings, and then was very, very successful. So you'll see all sorts of tantric images and things in India if you go around today to old caves and that. But to give you an idea how things can change to meet the needs of a new people, the Tantra, first we've got, all right, do no harm. That's the basic Buddhist vow. And this is the path of self-liberation. You just stop harming yourself and others. And it can lead to tremendous states called an arhat, which a conqueror, female or male, just you're sort of beyond suffering, and you can remain that way. It's said for eons, and it says that the arhat has the ability to walk through, has a certain level of wisdom, has the ability to walk through solid walls. I mean, it's a very, very high state. But then there's what's called the Mahayana, the Great Path. And there's conventional Mahayana, which is what the Dalai Lama teaches publicly, and what Khenpo teaches. So what does this mean? We're still in our ordinary body, but we're teaching cause and effect, great loving kindness and compassion, and we're practicing what are called the 6 perfections. So that's what's on our altar when we do those offerings. We're doing the 6 perfections and then a couple other things too, but nonetheless, the idea is we're ascending to the perfection of wisdom. And you have, Prajna is where we're going, Sherab in Tibetan. And this is full understanding, Buddhahood, but we're going up to it, so to speak. So it's perfection. We're going step by step by step by step by step. And in the meditation, you have, like if you see in Zen centers, you will, they do the mudra, for the meditation mudra, the hands in the palm of your lap, and you have the left hand on top of the right hand in this gesture. And why? Because the left is wisdom, and the right is activity, is skillful means. But we have the left on top. It's suppressing that, because in our ordinary state, we're in a corrupted state. At least we think we are. And so everything we're doing is suffering or dissatisfaction. And so if we're running around trying to do too much with our right hand, so to speak, we get in trouble. So we're suppressing it with wisdom. We're just making sure wisdom is always, always, always in the driver's seat in this conventional Mahayana. This is what we're doing. But because we have these teachings, the Buddha said every single one of us actually is a Buddha right now, completely awake. We just don't know it. Therefore, it's actually valid to practice as if you are a Buddha. So in the Perfection of Wisdom teachings, we're practicing the causes of enlightenment. We practice virtue, we practice loving kindness, we practice patience, we practice joyful dedications, all of these things. These causes will arise, result in awakening. But in the Tantra, we're practicing, instead of the path of cause, we're practicing the path of result. Since the Buddha said, actually, that we are Buddhas, it is completely valid to visualize yourself as a Buddha. And as we do that, there are two aspects to it. One is called the generation stage, which is kind of like drawing a picture of yourself as a Buddha. And then there's the completion stage, where you're actually realizing yourself as a Buddha. So this gets very highly technical, but instead of prajna, the perfection of wisdom, we're working with jnana, which is absolute wisdom, or yeshe in Tibetan. So everything is pure. And of course, this seems like kind of violative to us. It's like, well, I can't, I'm pretending. But it's valid. As one master said, one Chinese monk once said to a Chinese master, and it wasn't even about the Tantra, he said, "Master, is Buddha Amitabha's Pure Land real?" And the master said, "Well, is all of this real?" Pointing around the monastery. And the monk said, "Yeah, this is all real." He said, "Buddha Amitabha's Pure Land is more real." So it's an extremely skillful method, but has a lot of protections with it. And why? Because in the perfection of wisdom, when we're practicing conventional Mahayana, we are using our desire. We're using our love and compassion. And in one sense, especially in ancient India, that would have seemed kind of like, well, that's something you should just stay away from. It was this idea of just staying away from all the emotions and everything. But to be skillful, we can actually use love. And that's the conventional Mahayana. But in the Tantra, because we are Buddhas, we're able to use all the afflictive emotions. And that's why the Tantra is said to be more powerful. Whether it's anger, whether it's jealousy. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I think you did this, you explained this in the past, but the difference between prajna and yeshi.
Yeah. There's no difference.
Oh,
They're the same. It's just that with one, you're looking up to prajna, and with yeshe, you're already there. You're looking down at sentient beings, you might think.
okay,
So
thank you.
Yeah, just different in concept, you might say. So you're able to actually use. We transform. It's a path of transformation. The path of the conventional Mahayana is a path of gradual accumulation, gradual ripening, you might say. But the path in Tantra is a path of transformations. We transform ourselves into a Buddha. We practice pure vision, which means bodhicitta, this great aspiration to liberate all beings. Bodhicitta is called the five certainties in the Tantra. And what that means is I'm certain that I'm a Buddha. I'm certain that all these other beings in my life are bodhisattvas. I'm certain that the teaching is the pure Vajrayana, the pure teachings, the highest teaching. I'm certain that this place is a pure land, not just Rochester, New York. And I'm also certain that, I'm forgetting the fifth certainty. You're getting an old man now, you realize. But at any rate, yeah, that's right. Thank you. And the teacher is a Buddha, not just someone farther along. And as is said, you get the blessings depending on your confidence and faith, not blind faith, but your sincere faith. If you come to the ocean with a thimble, you'll get a thimble full of water. If you come with a truck, you'll get a truck full of water. If you come with yourself, you will fill with water yourself. So it's up to us. This is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But nonetheless, so the tantric teachings are special. They are believed by the Tibetans to be the practices for our time, because ours is a time of degeneracy. Ours is a time when virtue is generally seen as being non-virtuous, and non-virtue is seen as being virtuous, and that also the afflictive emotions are very rough. Everything is like exaggerated and harsh. And the Tantra is able to use those. So hence that quote that you asked about, Tiffany, from Gar Rinpoche, that Guru Padmasambhava, the man who brought really most of the Tantra to Tibet, he was Indian, and he was, I think, from the Swat Valley in modern-day Pakistan. But he said, and Gar Rinpoche quoted him to the effects of, in the degenerate time when the world is on fire, the sacred mantra teachings should be propagated and taught. So that's why we're doing this at all, because it's very, very high kind of teaching, and yet there are no mistakes. So Dalai Lama went through that basic thing on the skandhas, and then talking about the continuity of mind, and now he gets to the preparation of death. Okay. And he's saying now, as to the nature of the actual preparation itself, this 20, 2. Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you, Keen. Now, as to the nature of the actual preparation itself, this will depend on each individual's depth of spiritual aspiration. For example, if an individual is simply seeking a favorable rebirth as a human being, there is no need to engage in a sophisticated meditative path related to the processes of death and rebirth. Simply to live a virtuous life is seen as sufficient. Similarly, in the case of those who are seeking personal liberation from conditioned existence, and also in the case of those whose practice is confined to the sutra level of the Mahayana path, again, that's the conventional level, their meditative preparation will be limited to ensuring the attainment of successive forms of existence that will be conducive to the continuation of their journey towards enlightenment. For these three kinds of individuals, no actual techniques for utilizing the time of death as an essential element of the spiritual path have been set down in the classical Buddhist literature. Nevertheless, since the understanding of the processes of death, the intermediate state, that's the after-death state, and rebirth are crucial to our understanding of the nature of existence itself, we do find extensive discussion of these three processes, even in the texts which relate to the aspirations of these three kinds of persons. It is exclusively in Tantra, however, and particularly in highest Yoga Tantra, that the methods for utilizing the processes of death, the intermediate state, and rebirth are specifically taught as the basis for achieving liberation from cyclic existence. These methods involve the development of a skillful relationship with certain experiential stages that an individual actually induces with the intention of enhancing spiritual realization and the fruition of their capacities as a human being. Generally speaking, the practices of highest Yoga Tantra present a spiritual path which enables the individual to attain complete Buddhahood within a single lifetime, prior to the moment of death. Yet for those who are unable to achieve this, it becomes crucial to use the transformative opportunities offered by the naturally occurring process of death, the intermediate state, and rebirth. Hence, in highest Yoga Tantra, it is not merely the preparation for a more developed future rebirth which is important, but of more fundamental significance is the personal preparation for using one's own death and subsequent states as a means of achieving liberation. In the literature of highest Yoga Tantra, as I have mentioned, the three realms of conditioned existence into which a human being may be born are described in terms of differing expressions or modalities of energy, and energy is lung, pronounced lung in Tibetan, prana and lung, prana in Sanskrit, lung in Tibetan. So the three realms of conditioned existence in which we may be born are described in terms of differing expressions or modalities of energy, and it is said that our fundamental ignorance is the root of conditioned existence, and that karmic energy is its activating force. Further, from the tantric perspective, death, the intermediate state, and rebirth are also seen as nothing other than differing modalities of karmic energy. The point at which the gross levels of energy are completely dissolved and only the subtle energies remain is death. The stage at which these energies unfold into a more manifest form is the intermediate state. It's called the bardo. Bardo means gap. And the stage at which they eventually manifest substantially is called rebirth. Thus, all three states are differing manifestations of energy, lung. And lung is often translated as wind. When we get into the actual tantric practices, the winds are the energies flowing around through the body, and there are different tiglis or bindus or essences that are being transported by them in the different central channel, different things that we can do, but that's in the future. All right, so all three states, differing manifestations of energy. Based on this understanding, since death is the state when all gross levels of energy and consciousness have been dissolved and only the subtle energies and consciousnesses remain, it is possible for an advanced yogin to meditatively induce a state which is almost identical to the actual experience of death. This can be achieved because it is possible to meditatively bring about the dissolution of the gross levels of energy and consciousness. When such a task is accomplished, the meditator gains an enormous potential to progress definitively in his or her spiritual practice. For at the stage when the experience of fundamental inner radiance is genuinely effected through such a method, the yogin gains the capacity to actualize the illusory body of the meditational deity, thus ensuring the realization of perfect Buddhahood in this lifetime. So on Sunday, for instance, when we visualize ourselves as Tara, that's the illusory body. There are different bodies of mental creation. There's the bardo body, in the after-death state, we feel like we have our body and we're walking around with all these experiences. They call it the bardo body. Then there's the dream body. You can have a dream body of yoga in the dream state. So anyway, there are different kind of subtle bodies that can be experienced and discovered. Okay. This achievement of perfect Buddhahood entails the actualization of the three dimensions or bodies of a Buddha. These fruitional bodies are related both to our ultimate natural state and to the emanational qualities of full enlightenment. Interestingly, we see exactly the same pattern of dimensions in our ordinary existence. Death is the point at which both the physical and mental fields dissolve into inner radiance, and where both consciousness and energy exist at their most subtle, non-dual level, as in deep sleep. This mode, in its fruitional state, is the Buddha body of reality, the Dharmakaya. All right, so this is this discussion of, how does a Buddha exist? And it's said that a Buddha is existing simultaneously in three ways. One is the body of truth, Dharmakaya, that's literally what it means. And it means not body like, like a body, but like a body of knowledge or something. Just this vast existence. The Dalai Lama says it's like space, the sky. You look up and it's just nothing you can say. It's not limited. You can have space inside a little tiny atom. You can have space, the whole universe. I mean, it's just space. It's limitless. But it also has quality. It's blue. It's not just emptiness. There's something beautiful there, you might say. And then, so this is called the Dharmakaya. And now he's going to mention the Sambhogakaya. Then from within this essential or natural state, one enters into the intermediate state. So this is the after death state, corresponds where, although there is perceptual experience, the phenomenal forms are comparatively subtle and non-substantive, as in a dream. So this is the after death state. Again, there's all this drama going on and experiences, and we feel like we have a body and we're walking around, but it's like a dream body, it's non-substantial. This mode in its fruitional state is the Buddha body of perfect resource, Sambhogakaya. So this is the bliss body. The Dalai Lama is giving the example that the bliss bodies, the Sambhogakaya, are like the great cumulus clouds. So we're looking up in this vast space, right? And now there are these tremendous clouds. So there's some sort of form. There's subtle form there. There's form. And because there's form, this is very useful for us as practitioners because, we relate to form. And therefore, the Dharmakaya is like just too vast for us to even work. There are some who can, I suppose, but nonetheless, these big cumulus clouds, they're impressive, they're beautiful, and yet we can't grasp onto them. This is actually their power, but that's the state. Then, from that state, one assumes a grosser physical existence culminating in actual rebirth, as in our normal waking experience. This mode, in its fruitional state, is the Buddha body of emanation, the Nirmanakaya. Thus, we see a direct parallel between the three natural states of our existence and the three dimensions of a fully enlightened being. And the Nirmanakaya, Dalai Lama has said, is like the rain falling. So now suddenly we're, something we can experience. It's gross enough. Obviously, it's related to these big giant clouds. Obviously, the big giant clouds are just a sort of a function of this vast space. But now it's water. It's touching us. It's benefiting us immediately. The Nirmanakaya is also called the deceptive body. And this is something that's always given me faith, in my modern kind of materialistic, skeptical mind of the Buddhist path. Because it causes its own teachings as being deceptive. In the sense that they're not the thing itself. And of course, it's the basic understanding that's prevented, the religious wars and stuff, because they never say this is the thing itself. Everything here is like a finger pointing at the moon. Problem is we don't see the moon. And even with the initial meditations, eventually you can see a reflection of the moon, but you're even taught that's not the real moon, so you're not even going to go to war over that. It's very helpful. But what's significant here, what the Dalai Lama is pointing out, is that our natural states that we have right now, this is why Buddhism is non-dualistic. We don't have to go somewhere else, so to speak. The way that a Buddha exists, we're experiencing that right now. But in these non-fruitional matters, we see it like through a glass darkly or something, and that we don't have the complete power and freedom and bliss of it. But nonetheless, there it is. Our gross existence corresponds to the Nirmanakaya. This subtle existence wandering around in the bardo corresponds to the Sambhogakaya. And our moment of death is limitless. And this corresponds to the Dharmakaya. So that can give us, great confidence. Now, since actualization of these three dimensions can be effected through the transformation of the three ordinary states of our existence, we find an array of practices which contain specific meditative techniques focusing on those attributes which the three ordinary states of existence and the three Buddha bodies have in common. Through these practices, a continuity is developed between the ground or base, our ordinary state, the path, and the fruition, the Buddha bodies. So this comes up again and again in Mahamudra and Dzogchen. The ground, the path, and the fruition, that triad. In order to highlight the potential for liberation which exists in the skillful transformation of the ordinary states of existence, the great Indian Buddhist master Nagarjuna used the term kaya, even when describing the three ordinary states. Thus, the dimension kaya of the moment of death is equated with the basic dharmakaya, the dimension kaya of the intermediate state, the bardo, with the sambhogakaya, and the dimension kaya of the rebirth process with the basic nirmanakaya. Thus, it is said that through the meditative ability of an accomplished yogin, a genuine assimilation takes place at the actual moment of death, upon entering the intermediate state and upon beginning the process of rebirth. With respect to training in these practices, a similitude of such an assimilation can be effected during the waking state through generation stage practices and during sleep through dream yoga practices. Now, before we continue, so this is very heavy, I know, and it's very thick. And can you imagine the Dalai Lama? Just like, but this is like when you see the Vajrakalaya book, you'll experience the same kind of thing. Here's Garmache, he's here, he's never been to school. He was in the monastery as a young boy, and this just pours out of him, and it's just so beneficial to us because, speaking as myself, if you have a lot of arrogance and pride and that, when you're up against that with someone, you meet someone who loves you more than you love yourself. It's very kind of, wow, humbling. And then when you see this kind of teaching, no matter how arrogant you are, you can't pretend. It's like you still have the arrogant habit going on, but it's false in your heart. And so it's like the root has been cut from it. That's why these practices are so powerful. People should never get discouraged, in one way or another, because it's always working. It's extremely skillful. But nonetheless, in Tantra, the practice of imaginatively generating the meditational deity, that is to say, the practice of Tantra's generation stage, is a unique path by which the three fruitional dimensions, or Buddha bodies, are brought into the path of one's own practice. It is through understanding the profundity of this method that the Tantric approach can be fully appreciated. The process of generating oneself as the meditational deity is the means by which the indivisible union of the realization of emptiness and the realization of perfect awareness is brought to fruition. This accomplishment directly counteracts the ordinary perceptions and apprehensions which underlie our ordinary dualistic experience. It is this accomplishment that culminates in the realization of the ultimate nature of mind, the Buddha body of reality, the Dharmakaya, the state beyond ordinary thought, where there is no longer any trace of the misapprehension of the nature of reality, of attachment or of aversion, only pure, radiant awareness. Yeah. So he's talking about the generation stage. And again, in the highest Yoga Tantra, there are said to be 4 different levels of Tantra. In the Nyingma, they talk about 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, thank you. 7 levels of Tantra. But those extra ones that are all condensed into what the new schools, that is the Geluk, the Kagyu, and the Sakya, call highest Yoga Tantra. So there's no contradiction there at all. Just slightly different ways of describing. But nonetheless, in the lower tantras, there's highly ritualistic activity, and you visualize you're in your ordinary body, and the Buddha is out there in front of you. Why? Because we're so outwardly oriented in our ordinary training, right? Our ordinary existence. We see everything out there, even though even scientifically we know it's all in here. But we experience, it looks out there to it. It appears to be outer. So we start out with practicing with the Buddha out there because it's easier to visualize the Buddha there. And then eventually you have the Buddha come over your head. So there's activity tantra, there's kriya upa tantra. I can't remember what the translation is, but then the next one you visualize the Buddha over your head, and that's usually for most people a little harder to do. And then finally there's yoga tantra where you become the Buddha joins with you. And then the higher yoga tantra, and there's what the Nyingma call Maha, great yoga tantra, where now you are the Buddha completely, and in the veins and channels, all the subtle bodies exists, and then there's the realization of that. So I'm getting too far in the deep. I'm not going to explain all of this right now, but my point is that we're talking about highest yoga tantra, and the practice there is one, the generation stage, where you create yourself as the deity, the Buddha, and then there's the completion phase, where we understand, we experience ourselves directly as the Buddha, and then the dissolution of that is like Dzogchen or Mahamudra, complete understanding. So these are highly technical, but yet very, very powerful. It's said to be, for instance, like the generation stage is like taking a bow and an arrow and pulling back on the bow. All of that potentiality and power. And when you let the string go, that's the completion phase. The other example that I gave you is the generation stage is like drawing an outline of yourself kind of as the Buddha, and then filling it in with the actual experience, which is the completion phase. So these have a lot of technical terms. But basically, when we visualize ourselves as a Buddha, there are three qualities that we need to be doing. The whole thing is a practice of pure vision, like I mentioned, these 5 excellencies. But the basic thing is called Vajra pride. You want to think, I am a Buddha. And even you have this thought again and again and again, no, I'm just pretending, whatever it is, doesn't matter. You're still training yourself in this basic faith. I am a Buddha. And that's where a Lama could help, because he said, I am a Buddha, and he's never lied to me before. So even though I lie to myself all the time, somehow I can believe the whole purpose of the outer Lama is to show you your inner Lama. It's all skillful. But nonetheless, Vajra pride. And then there's clarity. You want to have clear awareness. So this is where we are concentrating, you might say. And it's important you're trying to see all the different aspects of the visualization as much as you can do. And then finally, there's the symbolism, the meaning. It's important to know what these things mean. Although you actually can learn the meaning just by absorbing in them. You can have these kinds of experiences. Kind of like, I think, like Einstein saying, I didn't develop the theory of relativity through my thinking mind. There's something deeper going on. It's that way for us too, these practices. But nonetheless, those 3 qualities are important. The Vajra pride, the clarity, and the understanding of what it means. So for instance, when we see in Vajraklaya, like the text that you were just referencing, Vajraklaya has 4 legs. And so you're visualizing yourself with 4 legs. Well, that seems pretty weird in kind of a materialistic kind of way. Why do I have to do 4? All these kinds of doubts. But then you discover that those 4 legs are the 4 immeasurables, the 4 highest worldly states that you can attain to. And the Buddha, his great teachings, one of the things he did with these teachings in India at the time, the 4 immeasurables, yes, they have tremendous realization, tremendous, very, very refined states. They're called the 4 stations of Brahma, the greatest deity in ancient India. But the Buddha he didn't deny any of that, but he put it together with basically non-dual human experiences. So the basic level, one of those legs is, vast love. And another leg is vast compassion, wanting being to be free from suffering. And the other one is emptiness in the sense of the insubstantiality of all phenomena. No matter how small the atom, you can always cut it in half. And then the last one is neither perception nor non-perception. And these subtle mindsets. So anyway, there's so much meaning in these visualized forms that even just gazing on it, you're training your mind. And because these are not false, you're actually putting connection with, like he said, these are the fruitional states, fruitional, this is the Sambhogakaya, this is the fruitional result of these actual experiences that we have right now. But we see things in kind of a clouded way. I sometimes think of that English poet William Blake, who said if the lens of perception could be cleansed, we would see the world as it is, infinite. It's like that. But these are methods of doing that. And so the vividness of our visualization is Vipassana, is insight meditation. And the other thing that's powerful is that we're doing, in the sutric way, you're meditating, and then you're practicing wisdom in your meditation. And then when you're done with your meditation session, you're going around practicing compassion. So it's this, two-fisted effort, left, right, left, right, left, right. But in the Tantra, we're practicing those two things together. This is why it's said to be more powerful, because the concentration that we're doing is the shamatha, the calming the mind, but the vividness of it, or the sense, the feeling that I am a Buddha, is the alive aspect. And these things are already together, just as wisdom and compassion are completely together in Buddha body. All right, so I'm jabbering a lot, forgive me, but we're already at 8 o'clock. We got back to where I was going to start. All right, so next time.
Sounds like you've been playing Mother Man.
Right. Oh, and look at this. He's next talking about the 4 classes of Tantra. Okay, so we'll start there next time. Any questions right now? Forgive me for all my motor mouth. Pat and Keen.
I don't know, you may negate this question, but I just was wondering, don't some people believe there's a link between Einstein's theory of relativity and emptiness or something? Some of the higher teachings on emptiness?
I wouldn't go there. It's like, I don't know, really anything. I don't know anything about the relativity in that, I'm just, I'm duly impressed. And I have faith that he knew what he was talking about and wasn't just some sort of guy that you might meet on the street.
Well, no, but even the Dalai Lama has his Mind and Life Institute, which brings all these scientists to him.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no contradiction, but I don't want to mix, relativity, which has specific meaning, with, with emptiness. One behind you too. Wait.
Can we just go over the other mudra? So we talked, you talked about
Right.
the conventional Mahayana
Right.
mudra, and then there's the Vajrayana mudra
Yes.
that is the opposite.
That's
So
right.
we-
Forgive me, I forgot that.
could.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
the meditation mudra in the Vajrayana is the right is on top of the left. And why? Because we're Buddhists right now. So therefore we can do all this activity. And again, for some traditional type of Buddhists, that makes them angry. It's like you can't. It's like some sort of great arrogance or something. But this is why the Vajrayana is protected by having to have empowerment. Has all sorts of samayas, bonds of trust and bonds of practice. Have to take refuge. There are all these. Like there are 14 great tantric vows. And it was also some of the. I think it was Asanga, was this great Indian practitioner who came from India to Tibet in the second kind of tsunami of transmissions that came to Tibet. Our tradition is one of those. He said, when he first learned about Buddhism and do no harm, and he was just going to avoid the afflictive emotions out of which negative thoughts and activities come, bad karma. He said he could do that pretty easily, stop lying, stop killing things on purpose, stop arguing, making divisive talk, all sorts of stuff. He could do that. And then he entered the Mahayana, where you had to be working for the benefit of all and considering all beings as having been your mother. And he said that was hard, but it took some years, but I actually did it. And then it came to the Vajrayana, you entered the Vajrayana, and they said, now you have to consider all beings as Buddhas. He said, I can't do that. It's like too hard. You fall again and again and again. But the teaching they have is that the Tantra, the Mantrayana, the Vajrayana, the Tantrayana, all these different terms, is like a silver offering bowl. It's very easily dented, but pure silver very easily repaired too. So we do this practice and we're failing all the time. But even to see how we're failing, so to speak, you can have one kind of pure moment, and it shows you how kind of distracted you are all the other times. But that's wisdom, seeing how you're actually distracted. And it immediately works as sincere compassion, because you come across everybody else in the street and they're the same way. They're just lost in their distractions. But you've experienced that moment undistracted, and you see how your distractions get you in trouble again and again and again. And so suddenly you have real compassion for all those people instead of this like phony compassion. I should be, or I want to appear to be compassionate. Suddenly it's totally natural. But thank you, Pat. That's a good one. So right on left is how we do the meditation mudra. Yeah, Zen is the other way. Most the other way. The whole sutra teachings are all the other way.
So I'm going to recommend that everybody runs for political office because, now hear me out, because you are forced to meet hundreds of people and love them in the state that they're in order to have interaction with them. Odd thought that just crossed my mind. Two questions. One, is there any particular belief as to what one should do with a body once someone has passed? And is there a process that goes along with it? I know
Yeah.
that's one question.
Yeah.
Probably a big one that you can't answer in a sentence. And then in here, what is dream yoga practices?
Yeah. Well, first on the body, it's actually pretty simple. Most Buddhists is cremation, but it's not always that way. In Tibet, they had sky burial, for instance, where they would actually, we've been to this place in Tibet, where they would do all sorts of prayers over the body because they believe that the death takes about 3 days, actually, the internal death. But then eventually the body is put up on the top of this mountain and they let the vultures eat it. So it's just kind of dust to dust kind of thing. But there aren't really there's no prohibition against burial, for instance, or anything. So it doesn't really matter too much for the Buddhists. More important is the actual dying process itself and not interfering with that in certain ways. So for instance, because it's said that the outer death takes place, what we call death is the outer death to the Buddhists. And then there's a time that this inner death is happening, usually about half an hour. And so in that time, the dying person doesn't know they're dead. And if you have someone with like a lot of wailing and crying and that, it can be very upsetting to their mind. So you want everything calm. So there are practices like that, not to touch them on the bottom of the feet, making their mind thinking of going down. We want their mind going up. So there are some practical things that we'll get into in the Book of the Dead. But yeah, that's about the practices at death, which is exactly what we're going to go through. But then the dream yoga, in one tradition, ours, called the highest teachings, are Mahamudra, the great gesture. It refers to, or the great seal, because this understanding of the nature of reality is the seal that's covers everything. Just like in an ancient kingdom, for a law, the king would put his seal on a document, and then that seal was empowered everywhere throughout the. So this is like, the Dharmakaya penetrates everything. And so this is the teaching of pure awareness. So we had the path I mentioned of this gradual ripening. Then we had the path of transformation of the Tantra. But then there's the path of great perfection, where it's direct recognition of the nature of mind from moment to moment to moment, without really not much method at all, very high state. So when we go from our practice, the perfection of wisdom, and then we're going to progress to Mahamudra, this ultimate kind of state and practice. It's said that there's form Mahamudra and formless Mahamudra. Formless Mahamudra is what I just mentioned, where it's just the direct recognition from moment to moment to moment of what's arising in the mind and the actual nature of that. But more skillful than that is said to be form Mahamudra. So even though it's this vastness, it still has this aspect, and they're called the 6 yogas of Naropa. One of them is dream yoga. So it's said that, generally we use the term bardo or gap to refer to the time between you die and the time you rebirth. But they're actually like 6 different bardos, 6 different gaps. One of those is when we're in a dream state. So there's a dream yoga practice for that. Then there's, in our waking state, that's the illusory body. Tumo is the practice for that, generating heat in the body, but moving things through the central channel. The heat's just a byproduct. It's not the point, but yet it creates great warmth in the body. Then there's the moment of death and clear light, because what happens is that all of our gross, like he said here, our gross mind states and consciousness are gradually sort of going back to the source, you might say. So the form dissolves into the water element, and we see like mirages. And then the water element dissolves into the fire element, and we see like fireflies. So there are these experiences that you train yourself to be able to recognize as they're happening. But eventually it all goes down to like this little vacuole in the middle of your heart, which is like deep sleep. And we actually have an experience of like total blackness. For most people, they think that's, that's it, if they experience any of this at all, because they're subtle states. But out of that comes what's called the clear light. And if you're trained, and especially if you've done lots of virtue in your life, that clear light moment lasts longer. For most people, it's a snap of a finger, and if you're not trained in meditation, you miss it completely. But if you're aware of this, and it seems to last longer, you can come to the Dharmakaya, full Buddhahood, in the recognition of that moment. But then usually that doesn't happen, and so other things start happening. Eventually you get the Bardo body, you're going around with that, then you're reborn. But there's also POA, this teaching that just happened in New York last weekend or 2 weekends ago, of transformation. The POA is the transformation. POA is in the future tense, but methods by which at the moment of death, you can throw your consciousness happily to complete enlightenment, but if not, to a pure land or to a more favorable human rebirth. So there are many, many techniques, but dream yoga is one of those 6 gaps that we normally have in our existence. So every one of those gaps, there's a special kind of practice that can be done. The 6 yogas of Naropa. And yoga, as you might know, is related to the English word yoke. It means to unify. So we're unifying with our true nature. And Naropa is in our very tradition. Our realizations came from Vajradhara, this, non-historical Buddha, then directly to Tilopa, who was a great yogi in India. And Tilopa transmitted them to Naropa. So that's where these teachings come from. They're the 6 yogas of Naropa, but they're also the 6 yogas of Naguma, who was Naropa's consort. So it's like I said, 84,000 different classifications of teachings, but they're all bodhicitta, and they're all just direct, clear awareness. Okay. Thank you. Sorry for all those words. Oh.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Franco. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Stay up.
For
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Very sweet. Thank you all. All right, so
May you
we
live
got
long
back
and
to the
prosper, Frank.
beginning point, right? We'll be there next week. Start over again. So, sorry, Tiffany, we threw all that at you to just give you a little chance to be up to speed to where we were in the text. Right. Right. Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah.
There's other organizations that there's other organizations that I belong to, and I mean, a lot of this is just tied into it. If you come over to my house, I have a bunch of the symbols that are all over this, all over the house, and I'm like, oh, I'm walking around, I'm like, huh, it's kind of weird. So, yeah. It's great.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, boy. I tell you guys, this is really sweet. Really sweet.